Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview.
No problem.
Oh, awesome. Well, it's great to be able to catch up with you again. Being able to help promote the last two albums that you've done, it's great to be able to talk about The Reckoning Dawn, which is coming out in just a few hours now.
Yeah, well, 4 hours in the UK, so it's 8 o'clock now, so it's coming out at midnight. Yeah, it feels good to have that coming out. It's been a long process, and I'm just glad that people get to hear it soon. It's cool, kind of having all the build up, but then you just want to get to a point where you just want everyone to be able to hear it and get into it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I'm glad that you still decided to be able to release the album, because I know a lot of music is being delayed right now until things start to get somewhat back to normal. And I'm glad to see that this album is coming out, because it really does feel like an album that should be heard in times like these. I mean, it perfectly sets a tone for what's going on.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a strange one, really, isn't it? And I think lots of artists, ourselves included, were a bit unsure as to what to do, in regards to putting out albums. I mean, for myself, and maybe yourself, I've been stuck at home for the past, I think, 6 or 7 weeks by now. And, feel like you're almost living Groundhog Day, the same stuff. And, you're kind of trapped in the four walls other than being allowed to go out for kind of grocery shopping and things like that. So I personally think that having new albums coming out is a point of interest for many people, and maybe offers a little bit of hope, or just a break from the monotony, to have something new and interesting to focus on around what has been quite a cyclical existence for a few weeks. And I appreciate that some artists have kind of held off on it and maybe want to try and hold it back to tie it in with album release shows and things like that. But to me, I think, at this point and in this current situation, that music is hope and enjoyment for lots of people. And I think people will be stuck at home with lots of time to be able to kind of get into new albums, and maybe more so than perhaps when they were in their normal 9 to 5 lifestyle. So let's hope it pays off and works out for the best. I think we're kind of in uncharted waters here almost, so I hope that we've made the right decision.
Yeah, I totally feel that way. I know I've been checking out way more music, and yeah, I've been stuck at home in quarantine for quite a while now, and just being able to do more interviews, being able to check out new music, go back and discover music that I didn't give enough time to, or music I haven't even discovered yet. It's just like there's a lot of time to be able to do that now while you're trying to pass the time and trying to do new things. And yeah, again, it's just, that's why I'm so glad that this still came out and you were still able to have it released around this time, because it is such a magnificent album. And I really hope a lot of people are able to check it out when it comes out.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we put a lot of effort into this one, and yeah, it's something that's important to us for people to hear, and I guess thinking about it coming out, our record had already been made, I think, before sort of factories were kind of slowing down, and they were having to put all this sort of distancing measures in and things like that. So to me, it seemed like it was the right thing to do. I realized some of the retail stores would be closed for a period of time, and people won't be able to go and buy the physical copies walking into a shop, but equally, lots of people buy the record online anyway, and lots of those retailers have got online offerings, and people can still access them. So it feels like if it's all there and all the pieces are in place, then why not? The only thing that's really affected, I guess, for us is just that our album tour has had to be delayed by 12 months, and lots of our kind of festival appearances, like many other bands, have been postponed and all those kinds of things. So it might be a strange thing to tour an album in 12 months' time when it's been out for a year, but everyone knows the situation we're in, so hopefully people are still on board with it and still support it as and when we can get out with it.
Yeah, and the other way I'm trying to look at that as well is it gives people a whole year to be able to listen to the album and really start to appreciate it, and hopefully want to be able to check out the album and the songs live. And yeah, I mean, when you have that kind of build up, and for a lot of people, like when you're immediately going out on tour or doing shows right when the album's released, some people may not hear the songs until they see you live, and in this case, they have a whole year to prep for it.
Yeah, that's a good perspective, actually. And I do often think that, bands sometimes do tour very close to the release of their album. And I understand that you want to kind of strike while the iron is hot and, kind of capitalize on that build-up. But you are right, sometimes you need 2 or 3 months to live with an album, don't you, to kind of get under the layers and kind of have it seep in and become familiar with it. Because you want to then see those songs and know what's coming and kind of be into those moments, as opposed to kind of trying to absorb it for the first time. So, yeah, I mean, maybe it'll work out well. And I know we're certainly keen to kind of get out and do those shows and get back on with doing those kinds of things. But obviously, doing tour is even more difficult than just kind of everything else that's going on, because it's not just our country's government that we need to wrangle with. Obviously, it's the governments of all the countries in Europe that we'd want to kind of go and visit, and individual countries and individual restrictions and all those kind of things. So it's very very challenging logistically at the moment. So hopefully that finds a resolution quite soon.
Oh, I really hope so. And, along with that, of course, with hopefully getting that resolved and being able to do everything coming up in 2021, I mean, it's just, I really love the fact that this album is coming out in just a few hours now, and I can honestly say this is my favorite album to date from you. I really love everything that's going on here, and it's always great with each album. It has its own distinct identity behind it, and it's great to hear like another great new chapter from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're really proud of this one, and I think we feel within ourselves that it's one of the best metal albums that we've ever made, definitely. And I can't help but think that maybe some of that is perhaps due to the fact that we kind of stepped away from metal for a year or two there and did some other things and kind of pushed ourselves into other territories to learn new ways of writing songs with different instruments. So I'm hoping that people come back and hear it and think, wow, this is a really kind of visceral and immediate Winterfylleth album that still has all the things I liked about the band, but also is, I don't know, just charged up a little bit more. That's a bit more kind of focused. That's got some different twists and turns, and that has been really thought about. And it's not just the kind of first thing that we wrote. We sweated over those songs for a long time and kind of self-edited and made sure that we weren't just putting out, I don't know, like derivative album tracks that just kind of fill the space between the 2 or 3 good songs on the album. We wanted every song to be of a standard, I think, and I feel like we've done that, and to me, it feels like our best whole album, and I think obviously having spoke to a few other interviewers and read some of the reviews that have come in, I think people are kind of agreeing with that, and I'm glad about that, really, because it's hard to kind of keep an album consistent for an hour's running time or whatever it is. So happy days, really. It's something that we've tried very hard to do and learn from everything we've kind of done over the past few years and kind of distill that down into what we have here.
Oh, and it's so great to hear that, too. I mean, yeah, with an hour's length of music, 8 tracks, I mean, it really is what I feel to be the best album you guys have done to date. I mean, between the production, the songwriting, the album cover is absolutely beautiful. And, you got a song like Absolved in Fire, which might be the most sinister song I've heard in decades, especially that instrumentation before the vocals come in. It's just like, it feels like it should be a part of a horror soundtrack.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's definitely one of the. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if maybe out there Winterfylleth tracks, but it's certainly kind of one of the more interestingly structured and maybe nuanced tracks that we've written in a long time. And I think that it really draws on that kind of previous experience from the acoustic album. It draws on kind of pushing some of the riffs into new territories and just trying to build that atmosphere and build that epicness and vastness, I suppose, throughout what is quite a long song in the end, almost 10, 11 minutes, I think, isn't it? So. Yeah, I'm glad that one sticks out, because that's definitely been a band favourite as we've been writing the album.
Oh, that's so cool to hear that, too. And yeah, I mean, with it being the longest track on the album, and of course, the other 7 tracks are just filled with some magnificent songwriting and everything that's going along with that. And yeah, just like you said, I think it really did help, like, being able to do a non-metal album and being able to do something different coming back to this, because it really feels like there's a rejuvenation in the band. And I didn't even think the band needed a rejuvenation, because it always feels like the band kept getting stronger and stronger. But when I hear this now, it's like you guys are on a totally new level here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. A few people have said, it feels like a rejuvenation. But equally like you said, I don't think that ever went away for us, really. I just think we decided to channel the energy of the band into a calmer and more atmospheric album, and I think that was really good for us as songwriters to try and push ourselves into different areas and to do more with less, I guess, and to try and find the atmosphere in instruments that maybe you wouldn't typically associate with it. So obviously we spoke about it at the time, but equally reflecting on it a few years later now, we were having to write for instruments that we don't play, like the violin and the cello, and think about more complex vocal arrangements and multi-part harmonies, and trying to kind of find atmosphere in instruments like nylon stringed acoustic guitars that aren't necessarily noted for their resonant nature or their kind of atmosphere giving characteristics, really. And although they can be played well and sound great, they're quite a dry sounding instrument and a warm sounding instrument. And actually, if you want atmosphere, a lot of that comes from the resonance of different instruments or from the kind of ring off of some of the kind of heavy guitars in the past. So I think we definitely took a lot of that to heart in making this new album and thought about how lead guitars work together, how we phrase the vocals and how we put the vocal harmonies and guitar harmonies and use of synth on this album and lots of different textures that we maybe hadn't used in the same way before, and have that stack up to what we have here on the album. I think that it's genuinely been a learning curve for us from having done that last album. It's not just kind of one of those platitudes that you might kind of say as like, oh yeah, we learned everything from this album, we learned a lot from it, and we've distilled it. It genuinely does feel like that, because we really were out on a limb trying to make an album that had the same kinds of atmospheres, but with no electric instruments. So coming back to it, it's clear to me, listening back to the Reckoning Dawn, that we've managed to kind of find our way with that and make something that I think is really kind of immediate and I don't know, powerful to my mind. So hopefully that resonates with everybody else and they feel the same way.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the way I'm feeling behind it, and I'm glad to see that there was that much time and effort that was really spent into making these songs the best that they possibly can be, too, because, especially after doing a non-metal album and you go back into doing a metal album again, I mean, there's a lot of different perspective you can take on with that, and I'm glad to see that, different types of instrumentation, use more atmosphere, being able to approach songs differently, and being able to take different takes, and just really making the songs at the best they possibly can be, because it's like when you actually do go out and you write something that's not typically known for the band and you go back into what you normally do, I think it gives you a whole new perspective.
I think so too, yeah. And it's one of those things as a band, you sometimes don't want to go too far off the reservation, because then you kind of lose the identity of what you are, but equally you want to kind of take what you have and make it into something more, and use the tools that you have and use the experience that you have to make that the best it can be. And I don't think we've ever made a poor album, or we've certainly not tried to, and we've always tried to kind of have great songs and considered songs and not just, like I said, the first thing we wrote, we really sweat the songs on all the albums, but I don't think you can help but absorb things as you kind of grow and age and learn from previous, albums and tweaks you might like to have made from those. So I definitely feel like it's as strong as we've been, and I'm hoping that people feel that too.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree with that. I mean, from the very first album all the way to now, I mean, I love every single album that you guys have put out so far, and like I said in the beginning, like, every album has its own distinct sound to it, I feel like, and this just feels like a brand new chapter of where the band is right now, and I just really like where it is in 2020.
Thanks, yeah, I agree, and I'm happy with where we are, so long may it continue. I mean, heaven knows how we're going to top this album, but I guess we'll have to try.
So, with that in mind, I mean, you were talking about, like, different kinds of vocal melodies and tracks that were involved in that. I mean, obviously with the instrumentation, there was so much that was put into this album, but when it came to the lyrics, like, how much of a challenge was that for you this time around?
I mean, I suppose compared to some bands, I think lyrics are really important in Winterfylleth, and even though they might not always be immediately apparent from hearing them, in the moment, as they often act as a bit of a texture or an instrument in themselves, lots of people that have spoken to me outside of the, kind of interviews and all those things, just at shows or people that have kind of contacted us, really kind of find a lot of meaning and interest in the lyrics. And so I guess there is a level of kind of responsibility that you maybe impose on yourself to write things that are interesting and that are evocative and that inspire interest in others. And as you know, I guess from the conversations we've had over the years, we've always tried to focus quite heavily on the lyrics and make sure that they mean something, and that there's a story to tell there, and there is kind of a narrative, I guess, in a way, and that they point to certain elements of history or the world or nature or whatever that is, and hopefully shine a light on them, or at least kind of give us the means with which to talk about the things that they're aiming at in interviews or with people who are interested in them. So writing them this time was I wouldn't say a huge challenge, but it does come with this unique challenge, is kind of trying to to write songs, write lyrics for really long songs, for example, and know how much to write and not be too wordy, and all those kinds of things. And actually, Dan, our other guitar player, wrote a few sets of lyrics for this album, so he was really keen to get into that as well, because he's been doing lots of that in his other solo project that he does as well. So he's been really kind of coming forward with some great ideas as well. So it definitely feels like a bit more of a collaborative effort there this time, and even musically, I think everybody had a really big involvement. So yeah, I mean, like I said, back to your point, it wasn't super hard to do the lyrics, but once we had the concept, it was good to kind of have some topics to aim for that kind of marry up to the concept.
Yeah, and again, I'm just so glad to hear that too, because yeah, just like we've talked about over the years, I mean, what really draws me to the band is not just the music and instrumentation, but also lyrically what you talk about as well. I mean, whether you're talking about the state of the world, whether you're going off on a grand adventure, I mean, there's so many different ways to be able to approach every single song, let alone every single album, and that's what draws me into the listening to the album from start to finish, because every song just feels like it has that purpose, because it has that instrumentation, has that songwriting, has the lyrical content that draw you in. And again, just seeing that everyone was just so gung-ho on making sure that this was going to be the best that it could be on all levels. I mean, again, I think it's paid off for the absolute best for the band.
Thank you. It definitely was a really conscientious team effort this time, and we were all quite aligned on that as well. We weren't really kind of pulling in any different directions or anything like that. Obviously, there's always kind of small disagreements or kind of points of view, but I think generally we were all kind of really focused on pulling in the same direction and knew what we wanted to achieve with it. And there was some strong ideas that came out. And for example, even Mark, who's our kind of keyboard player, wrote some great guitar parts that became one of the songs. So everybody was really firing on all cylinders this time. And obviously, like you've heard the 8-track album, but I think we recorded maybe 12 or 13 tracks, and some of them kind of have formulated this deluxe edition with like a bonus EP on it with a few extra songs. And then there was some that we didn't finish in the studio either, so they'll probably become whatever's next. So it was a really kind of big process for us, and I don't feel like any of the songs kind of drop the quality, like I said. So hopefully we can kind of keep that going, and it's interesting as well to have a bit more input from Dan and from Mark, who had never really written a lot of the metal stuff with us before, because they both joined sort of as we were doing Dark Hereafter. So we kind of written a lot of that before they were fully in the fold. So obviously we spent a lot of the time writing Halloween with them, and then latterly now they've had a lot more input on the metal stuff, and I think that's been to its advantage as well, to have some slightly different perspectives on that, and kind of hear some of their influence come into the songs too.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I keep saying it, but it is so true. I mean, this really does feel like it is the best album that you guys have done so far. And again, it feels so great to hear that the whole band's involvement, being able to write, bring their influences into it, and yeah, just making sure that the songs are the best that they possibly can be. And of course, when you do all of that, and you have someone great behind the board being able to produce, mix, and master the way that it has too. I mean, I really love the way that turned out as well.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, as ever on this one, really, we used our friend Chris Fielding to do the recording. I suppose what maybe sets this one apart for me is the fact that for the previous 2 or 3 albums, we'd recorded them at Chris's now previous studio that's closed down, and gone back to where we recorded before Chris moved to this new studio. So we used to record at a studio called Foal Studios in Wales, which has got a cool history in and of itself. It was owned by this guy Dave Anderson, who was in Hawkwind and Amon Duel and loads of cool kind of prog and 70s bands. And loads of kind of famous records have been made there. And then Chris kind of moved away from there and set up a studio actually a bit closer to where we live, near Chester on the sort of this side of England, and then that kind of closed down as he and his business partner sort of shut that down, and he's actually moved back to Foal, to Wales. So that's a really amazing studio, and it was the first time we've been there since we did the Threnody of Triumph in 2012. So I think that really spurred us on a little bit as well. We love that environment, and it's a really isolated studio that's in the middle of nowhere, and it's just a really kind of focusing place to be, because without kind of over egging it genuinely is maybe kind of like 10 to 15 minutes drive away from anywhere, the nearest sort of little village, down this kind of long one-way road through lots of kind of farmers' fields and down into this massive valley where this isolated studio and outbuildings are. It's a cool place to be, and a place that really focuses the mind, because there's not a huge amount else to do there. Other than sort of focus on and make the best record that you can. And, working with Chris for so many years, it feels like a really comfortable environment to do that in. And I think there's a lot to be said maybe by some bands for sort of changing your producer all the time and kind of keeping things fresh. But I think the bands that do that also forget the greatness that you can have from a long-term relationship, I suppose, in some ways, in that Chris knows us so well now and has helped us develop our sound that I think he almost has the permission to be able to say, like, oh, I don't think that's a very good idea, or you haven't done that very well, or, maybe you should try this. Whereas other engineers may not feel like they can do that because they don't know you very well. And so that I think that definitely worked out for the best. And we all, shared that kind of couple of weeks together in the studio that we had there, and our families were along, and it was a nice time. So it's definitely good to kind of go away and focus on those things. And then this is the first time as well that we've got Marcus Stock to do the mastering on the album. So he mastered Hallowing of Erdem, but hadn't mastered any of the metal albums before that. We'd always used a guy called Tim Turan, who's still amazing, but we just decided to go with Marcus because we thought he did a really great job on the Howling of Erdem album. And I think you can hear in the production, he's really got the most out of those songs, and he's really kind of sweat those tones and kind of made it kind of really bitey and punchy. And I think he's done an amazing job on it. And he's a great musician himself, as maybe he's in Imperium and Division Bleak and Son of the Sleepless. So he's got some great projects and understands this music, I think. So when you work with people who understand metal and understand the band, in Chris and in Marcus, then I think you can't help but produce something that's great, because I feel like more than other producers or mastering engineers, they understand this music and they understand what you're trying to do with it. And so it kind of comes without you having to explicitly explain the ins and outs of it, because they're almost on that page with you as well.
Oh, yeah. And, again, it totally makes sense. And even when you do switch things up, even when it comes to the mastering this time around, and, whether you're having a long-term relationship and being able to have someone behind the board who really understands the band, and getting someone new when it comes to the mastering side. I mean, I'm glad to see that when people really do get the music, that it can make the album so much better. And, again, having all of that from all sides, in the band, outside the band, and such an amazing sounding studio as well too. When you get all of that combined, it just makes for a killer album like this, and it's great to see that magic is still there. Yeah, definitely.
It's something that's important to me to kind of to do those kind of things for people like Chris and Marcus. And I do think those small details like the studio and the approach that we had there probably did make a difference. And when I kind of reflect on the history of those places, as I said, if you think about Fall Studios particularly, some of our favorite albums have been recorded there. Primordial did To the Nameless Dead there, and they did Redemption at the Puritan's Hand there. I think Napalm Death did a few albums there. The list is pretty endless, and I once kind of went for a look around the studio with Dave, who was the owner. He's not anymore. He sold it to a guy called Mike. But he showed me through the archives of all the masters that they had there, and all the old reel-to-reel tape and hard drives with all the album original recordings on, and it's like endless. Huge albums like Amon-Düül albums and Van de Graaff Generator, and these kind of massively important bands over the years. And so I can't help but think you end up almost kind of inspired by and sort of take reference from that place, because it's produced so many great things, and it just focuses you when you're there, like I say. So it's something that means a lot to us now, and I think it's definitely become part of Winterfylleth is working out of there too. So hopefully we can kind of keep doing that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what the next chapter of the band is going to be when you're using a different studio now. But I think that magic's going to be there. I mean, especially when the band is putting in more and more input, being able to put in their creativity and influences in, and getting the right people outside of the band to be able to help. I think that magic's just going to be able to continue, especially if this album is anything to go off of with Reckoning Dawn.
Yeah, I hope so, definitely.
So, with all of that in mind, I mean, obviously, audio-wise, the music is just absolutely incredible, and it makes for such a great album. But like I mentioned earlier, I absolutely love the album cover as well, too. I think it's just simply gorgeous with the landscapes that's going on there, the clouds, everything that's going about that. Like, how did that come together to make that the album cover?
Yeah, the album covers are always an interesting one for me. I think, as you know, we've always had these kind of quite evocative and atmospheric landscapes on the front cover of the albums, and I guess that's almost become as much a part of the the Winterfylleth aesthetic as maybe the music has in some ways. But not normally, it's the case that Simon, our drummer, takes a lot of the photos. He's a great photographer and likes to go on these kind of big hikes and missions and find these amazing places and sort of capture them on camera. But it didn't quite work out that way this time, with life getting in the way and just trying to find the right day, because I think on this album more than the others, we were quite keen to capture the idea of dawn in it. And, because I don't think any of the other albums have particularly spoken to a kind of a point in time or a point in the day or anything, they were more kind of broader titles than that. Whereas this one, it speaks about the reckoning dawn. And so we actually didn't go out and take the photo ourselves. We found a lady who's a landscape photographer whose name is Kathy Medcalf, and she took this photo. And what's great about that photo is it's actually quite near to where the cover for the fourth album, The Divination of Antiquity, was taken in the Lake District in the sort of northwest of England. And it's taken off a sort of, I guess, a hill, mountain, whatever. I'm not quite sure if it classes one or not, but it's taken near a place called Great Gable, and it's near Wastwater, which is where the Divination of Antiquity cover was taken. And she kind of got out there at an early morning, got right up to the top of it, and kind of photographed across it and kind of captured that light sort of coming across the hills at dawn. And to me, when I look at the photo, it almost looks fake. It looks like someone's photoshopped it, or it looks like it's kind of some sort of composite or something, but she sent us the raw photo, and it's a genuine photograph. And obviously, a bit of studio touching aside, it's pretty much what she captured. And it's amazing, really, that she was able to kind of find that light and that time of day and the right settings on her camera to kind of capture that, because it's so raw and beautiful. And I think it just perfectly sort of summed up the image that we wanted for the album. And it sort of ties in with the idea of dawn as well, and I think that maybe makes it a little bit more memorable. Obviously we've had quite wordy titles in the past, and I think The Reckoning Dawn is quite easy to remember, and it also kind of resonates with the visuals as well. So that's kind of how that came about, really. And we, Simon did do a lot of the photographs that are in the inlay, if you see that, and we also kind of leaned on a few other creatives and friends that we know that had some great images too. So it all kind of stacked up to make a great visual side to the album as well as the music.
Oh, that's just simply incredible, seeing how that all worked out. And yeah, I'm glad you were able to find someone that could really capture that Winterfylleth feel behind it when it comes to, the classic album covers that you guys have done so far. And it feels like it's so natural to the band. And I was wondering if it did have any correlation location-wise. And I'm glad to see that it does kind of interconnect that way. With Antiquity, because it kind of has that feel, although obviously different colors, different time of day, things like that, but just kind of like the landscape of it kind of feels like it's near each other, and it's so cool to see that actually was the case.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, it was. And she and another guy called Sean Howell, who we used for some photography, they're amazing, almost like next level photographers that have captured some amazing stuff. So I hope that even if people are not necessarily into the music, which obviously it's not for everybody, they might take some inspiration in some of those great locations that we found and kind of be interested to go on a hike, and maybe everyone will be desperate to do that once the quarantine is lifted. So maybe it's a good thing to kind of push people in the direction of nature as well.
Oh. Yeah, and of course that is such a huge theme of the band too, and just being able to have that in there as well. I mean, if the album cover, if nothing else, is able to help you appreciate nature and want to be able to discover that area one day, or just being able to go into their own nature, I think that's such an important thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, awesome. I think that's a great note to end on as well, too. Thank you very much once again for taking the time to be able to talk to me and being able to talk about this amazing new album from Winterfylleth, The Reckoning Dawn, which is, of course, just coming out in a few hours, but May 8th through Candlelight and Spine Farm. I love this album. I think it's easily Winterfylleth's best album of the day. It's easily going to be one of my favorite albums of the year when I write all that up in December, and it's just amazing to see the quality of work that continues to happen with the band, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be able to talk to me about all of it.
Well, thanks, Josh. Much appreciated, and we'll make it continue, really. Hopefully we make some more albums and we can do this again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every time that there's new release, I'm always anxious to be able to talk to you and be able to help promote that as much as I can, because I just know the quality of the band is just going to continue to rise and rise.
Thank you. I hope so. Well, I think we've set a tall order for ourselves for next time, so hopefully we can dig deep and find something else. But for now, this one's coming out tomorrow, and I hope people like it.